Alright guys, it's time for a lazy video of me doing one of my favorite things. Watching a Song of Ice and Fire YouTube crap. I figure if I'm gonna be in a Song of Ice and Fire YouTuber, I better start up some dialogue with my peers. This video is from RedTeamReview from 3 months ago. It's Preston Jacobs and Red Team just having a chat. It's called about the difference between a good A Song of Ice and Fire theory and a bad one. Let's begin.
The full episode is now available on Patreon and YouTube memberships. Please see the link in the description for more details.
Real quick, I also wanted to touch on this super chat that you got. This one guy, Jack Beastie, he made a very good point. I love.
So, a little background. I've been watching a Song of Ice and Fire YouTube content for, I don't know, the better part of a decade. And so, I'm familiar with most of them. And especially the more well-known ones like Preston Jacobs and Red Team. And they're basically household voices in my domicile. The sounds of the likes of Preston Jacobs and Red Team Review, LML and Disease from History of Westeros, and Guinevere and Yolkboy, David and Mary Ellen. My brain has them in the same category as very old friends, even though I've never met any of them.
The first sentence. When I hear a Song of Ice and Fire theories, my question is, how does this make for a good story? I agree with him because, and I'm not trying to bash on any YouTuber or theorist person on Reddit or whatever the fuck, but that's a good point. A lot of theories really rely on this person secretly being this person. And
yeah.
I think this is why you get so much praise the way you do, because Dornish Master Plan is essentially that Duran is this mastermind behind this grand idea that, you know, Qyburn is secretly working for him, Brave Companions are doing this, blah, 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 blah. It goes all over the place, and it, like, connects to, like, a bunch of different things. Same with, Pink Letter.
This is an interesting topic that comes up a lot in the Song of Ice and Fire discussion. It's the recognition that a lot of theories like to lean on hidden identity tropes are based around the idea that character A is secretly character B, or there's some hidden identity stuff going on, or multiple identity stuff. I go back and forth on my feelings on it, because in truth, the A Song of Ice and Fire fandom is full of really lazy versions of those theories. But at the same time, the books are also really full of instances of people having alternate identities and being mistaken for other people, which is effectively a fake identity. And then actual fake identities, where they meant to be mistaken for other people. Sometimes people who don't even exist, like Bloodraven pretending to be Maynard Plum. It's an interesting feature of the setting, because this is a setting where you can do that sort of thing. You can just make up a name and go to a wedding full of very important people and get in. Get in as this totally made up person, Maynard Plum, and just spy on everyone.
Letter, there's no one who's secretly anybody, right? It's just...
I mean, it's partly a consequence of them not having photography. So it's a world that we've never actually experienced. Nobody alive right now has ever lived through a period without photography. So we don't know what it's like to not be able to just refer to somebody's image. Like, what does their face look like? If you don't see somebody for a long time, and they change their face, like when Roderick shaved his beard, Catelyn didn't even recognize him after he shaved his beard at first. And this is a dude that she sees every day, pretty much, because he lives in Winterfell and works there. So imagine being a relative of Roderick, and he shows up like that. Not only will you not recognize him because he doesn't have a beard, but also because you haven't seen him in many years. And for all that time, all you had was your memory of him.
Who really wrote this thing?
Who really wrote it? I think the original appeal of the Dornish Master Plan, and I don't know if it makes for a good story or not, but I think the appeal of the Dornish Master Plan as a theory is the fact that it takes a lot of elements that were useless in the story, like the brave companions that seemed apparently useless in the story, like the Dornish story and the brave companions, and gave them purpose and direction towards something that will affect the plot. And I think that was the appeal. Like, oh, we have all these extra chapters of like Arya and Jaime and Brienne dealing with brave companions and all this like Arianne Quentin stuff. Like, all this seems like it was a waste of time. The show isn't dealing with them. It must be a waste of time because the show didn't focus on them.
This is a really good start for what the difference is between a good theory and a bad theory. A theory that takes a lot of information in the story that seemed useless and meaningless and uses it and makes it meaningful is definitely a characteristic of a good theory and a characteristic lacking in a bad theory.
At all. Actually, all of that time that you invested in reading those chapters, it was leading towards something. And I think that was the appeal that people they didn't like this wasted space of extra chapters, that they wanted these threads to be going somewhere. And so I think that's why people liked the Dornish master plan. I think with a lot of theories, I mean, theories might be true, theories might not be true. I mean, George...
I think he's right. I have actually watched the Dornish master plan a long time ago, but I think that was the essence of its appeal, is that it made meaningful a part and place of the story that seemed like a tangent from the main story that we've been following.
Write stuff randomly. So, but I do like when a theory...
So a lot of readers kind of feel like, why are we on this Dorne tangent? Why do we need to meet the Martells? I mean, even if you like the Martells and you're entertained and all that, people generally want something a little more from a story than entertainment. And just intrigue after intrigue piled on top of each other.
Theory, like, makes a good story. Like, Theon Kinslayer, the Theon Kinslayer theory, which is, that Theon at least suspects or fears that he accidentally killed his own kids when he killed the Miller's boys, makes for a better story. Like, that's more interesting and darker and torturous for a human being, And so I think that's why people, like that theory. Then there's just theories that, like, wouldn't necessarily, like, add...
I think the Theon Kinslayer theory could make Theon's story a better story. But it's a rare instance where I would say that it's a theory that actually doesn't go far enough. Normally my critiques of theories is that they reach too far. They try to explain more than they need to. But the situation with Theon and killing the Crofters boys or whatever, if those were his kids, as it stands now, it doesn't change his ending. Theon killing his own kids and not knowing it needs to become consequential in order to adequately explain its own existence. And it could become consequential the way Preston is saying, where it just haunts him and affects his sanity, and it becomes an internal struggle. And it might. But even then, it still doesn't feel like enough of a consequence infusion to sufficiently explain the existence of the story element of Theon accidentally killing his own kids. Or purposefully killing kids that he didn't know were his own kids till afterwards.
Anything? Like, say, Howland Reed is the High Septon.
That's a popular one. People love to toss around on, like, online forums.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we don't know anything about Howland Reed, so...
I don't like that theory either. Howland being the High Septon.
Him suddenly showing up as the High Septon would just be a simple shock. Which is something George does, don't get me wrong. But it doesn't enrich the story. It doesn't add anything. It's kind of an illogical, what? Okay, shocker,
I guess the idea is that since Howland Reed and Ned were best friends, this is Howland's way to get back at the Lannisters for his death. I guess that's the whole thing behind it, and that he's gonna make Cersei pay. He's gonna humiliate her, and then he's going to have her ultimately taken out. And
I think what Red Team just did there was a really important thing to do with theories. It's good to try to get a sense of the impulse that's driving a theory or an idea. And that's a pretty good spitball for what the impulse might be for the Howland is the High Septon theory. I think it could also just be a simple desire to see Howland become relevant in the story and finally do something. Finally play his role in the story, whatever it is.
So and so forth. But at the same time,
because he's been he's so central to the secrets of the story, like being the best friend of Ned and being at the Tower of Joy and apparently doing something important there that saved Ned's life, and being the attorney of Harrenhal and involved in that drama somehow, and apparently sending his kids to Bran. Yeah, Howland Reed is like smack dab in the middle of the story's cluster of central mysteries. And I think George R. R. Martin has even said that he hasn't had Howland show up yet because Howland knows too much. So readers are itching to see Howland appear and do something in the story.
He's not an important character. He's not an important lord. He's just like, he's nobody. He's nobody at this point in the story.
I should probably let the audience know that Preston has a vehement hatred of Howland Reed.
I do, but say I were going to take something, and I'm picking this random, right? Say rather than it being Howland Reed, the High Septon was actually Daemon Lannister. Like, that's actually a lot more interesting. Wait, whoa. Lannister is like trying to destroy another Lannister? Why? What is he doing? How does that affect the Lannister succession? How does that affect the war and control of House Lannister? All of a sudden, it's like actually a lot richer. And I just like picked a random character, like, or the High Sparrow is secretly a Dornish agent. Oh,
well, that's actually one of the things we know about Howland, is that he's kind of apolitical. He's just staying out of the politics and staying invisible in the Cranogs. And politics is the essence of the intrigue that almost any other character would add to the situation in King's Landing if he was the High Septon.
Oh, well, that all of a sudden like changes things because Tyene and Lady Nym are coming into town and this is happening. So, that sort of stuff. You got, it has to, you want it to pull in some interesting intrigue, rather than it just being something random, so.
That's a good point.
There's a lot of theories about like bringing Rhaegar back to life and stuff. And it's like, well, we don't really know Rhaegar, and Rhaegar doesn't mean anything to any of the characters anymore. Like most of the characters that have like with the exception of Barristan Selmy,
we kind of know Rhaegar secondhand. There's all kinds of opinions about him floating around. Thoughts about him. We know that Ned thinks that Rhaegar would never, probably never go to a brothel. We know that Rhaegar, like, played music to the common people and would, like, get money for it and then donate the money.
Like most of the characters that cared about Rhaegar are dead. So it's like, who cares if you brought Rhaegar back? Like no one would give a fuck. Like John Connington, I suppose, would give a fuck. I mean, I guess you can get John Connington would certainly care, but it's not quite as emotional as like him being somebody else.
I have something to say about that, but I can't say it. I shouldn't say it yet.
But that's That's what I'm saying. It's like, the pink letter does add a little extra spice to the story and makes it a bit more interesting than it already is. Dornish master plan, same thing. The Theon thing, same thing. I just never. I always thought it was very. I don't want to say bad, but like I always thought it was a little lazy with some theories of this character secretly being this character. It's just never really been a fan of it. You know how Varys is supposed to be secretly a Blackfire. How does that really change anything other than
this is actually my major problem.
Yeah, I don't like that one either.
I mean, I
Varys being a secret Blackfire. Like, it could change things. But the Blackfires are hardly in the main series. They're probably mentioned here and there, but it really hasn't been until A Dance with Dragons that any of the characters have even vaguely considered what's up with the Blackfires today.
I very much do think there's a Blackfire element to the new invasion, but Blackfire doesn't mean anything emotionally to any of the characters at this point. Like, it doesn't, like the Targaryens are this dying breed, right? Where Dany is the last dragon. And then discovering that, like, even having Aegon there as, like, not the last dragon, it's interesting for only Daenerys. Like, everybody else, like, doesn't fucking care. Like, the Lannisters haven't been around for years. It's not this like underlying aspect of the feud between the Starks and the Lannisters. It's not this like, it's not this underlying aspect of like of Littlefinger and his like obsession with Sansa. It's it's not this underlying aspect of Doran Martell's vengeance. It's not. There's so many things.
That's okay. We know what he meant.
It has nothing to do with Brienne's like ideas about like her oath to Catelyn. It's just a centuries old like family dispute that has like no emotional weight on any of the current characters.
But
it does have emotional weight with the audience, which is interesting because it has no emotional weight with the main characters, or even the secondary ones, really. It's a feature of the story and the Blackfire situation that could indicate that the emotional weight is going to come in through the avenue of the audience, where whatever we learn about the Blackfires is going to recontextualize the plot in the story to emotionally affect the audience.
It does connect us to Targaryen family history with Bloodraven, if Bloodraven is indeed the man in the tree.
Yes, it does. But I do think that like making the Blackfire situation a major focus of the story would be a mistake versus...
Yeah, Bloodraven is he's a key character that connects the past to the present. Because Bloodraven lived... He was the hand of the king to Aerys the First, who came after, I think, Daeron the First, or Daeron the Second, the Good. And Bloodraven was born during the reign of Aegon the Fourth, who you'll know if you've seen my Aegon the Fourth series, is the epicenter of a massive historical lie, a massive puzzle of history, for us anyway, where it's full of misrepresentations of what and how things really happened. And so Bloodraven's role as Hand of the King to Daeron II the Good appears to be a similar role that Ned occupied in Game of Thrones, where Bloodraven and Ned are both a guy who lived north of King's Landing and traveled south to King's Landing to be the Hand of the King to the current king and to clean up a political mess, basically. So Ned and Bloodraven are parallels of each other, and that suggests to me that whatever drama is going to come to the present day plot, or from history through Bloodraven, is going to be nearly or equally as important as Ned was to the plot.
Is like a Easter egg hint behind the scene for super fans, because it doesn't really mean anything. I mean, maybe in the Red Door, Danny, remember who you are kind of sense, but like, even that is kind of like not the most salient part of Danny's story. You know, I mean, taking something simple as Danny's a young girl who grew up an orphan and is now like a queen who wants to break the chains of slaves. Like, that's actually like a more powerful story than like Danny actually has some fuzzy memories and doesn't know who she is. As much as I obsess over like the Red Door and everything, it's kind of a lesser part of her personality, her story.
Have you heard the one about Quaithe is actually Danny from the future?
Yeah, the Red Door. It's such an oddly specific thing in Danny's story that it's intriguing. Like, it just being a red door is itself intriguing. Because it's really the absence of significance about it that's intriguing. Because there are other things in Danny's past that are not especially significant, but that still seem more significant than the door from her childhood home being a red door. Like, Danny liked sailing on ships, and she dreamed of being a sailor or something. That seems way more relevant to Danny's characterization, at least on the face of things, than the color of the door of her household, or her childhood home, was red. So there's all kinds of questions you could imagine about the Red Door, and it's hard to identify which of those questions would be useful in pursuing. Like, all right, why the door? Why does she remember the doors so strongly? And then why is the door red? Because it could have been any color, right? And then following that, or within that, you've got all these other questions of like, why not blue? Why not yellow? Why not white? Why not black? And these are like metatextual kind of questions, or story writing questions. They're questions about the real world, something in the real world. In this case, the author's intentions and his creative, his thinking behind his creative decisions, basically, his process and all that. And that's definitely a useful way to analyze the story, to consider the author's intentions, but only in relationship to the story. I don't think it's very useful to consider it in relationship to the author's background and his life and his personal dramas and his current events and all that. I really don't like analysis that pries into George R.R. Martin's life to try to like psychoanalyze him and reduce the story down to his hang-ups and quirks and shortcomings and experiences and all that. But when considered in relationship to the story, that's really good analysis, in my opinion. That's where you're asking questions like, what are some other red doors in this story? And what do those seem to mean? Is there a theme of red doors in the story? As in, do all the occurrences of red doors have something in common? And so let me reread those and think about them deeply and see if I can think of something that they all have in common. And then maybe I can extract an essence of scenes with red doors. And then maybe I can apply that to Daenerys' red door to help me understand the author's intentions with that and its symbolic meaning and all of that. So essentially, it's theme analysis. It's finding patterns in like things. And the like thing you extract from the red door doesn't have to be red door. It could be entryway, if you wanted. You could go look at all the other entryways in the story and try to extract the theme of entryways. It could be memories of doors, of characters just remembering a door. And you could try to extract a theme of characters remembering a door. Maybe that'll be useful in your quest for what's the meaning of the red door. So that's the way I like to analyze this story. I find it way more useful than let's pry into the author's life and try to figure the story out that way.
Sure. You heard that one?
Yeah. I mean, this is also my problem with like Quaithe being Shira Seastar, because it's like, who the fuck cares? Like, who the fuck cares about Shira Seastar? Like Bloodraven.
Hey, wasn't Shira Seastar like one of the most beautiful women in the whole story? If I remember right, she was considered the most beautiful woman of her day or something.
A guy in a tree a million miles away.
She was like the historical Ashara Dane or something.
Way, but who the fuck, like, you know, so it's like, sure, you can make her Shira Seastar, but it would have to be like this tiny little
which is actually interesting because it expands on the parallel between Bloodraven and Ned, where Ned apparently had the hots for Ashara Dane, and maybe even a romance with her, and likewise, Bloodraven had the hots for Shira Seastar, the other most beautiful woman in the world in her era.
Like Easter egg in the background. Even Quaithe.
I'm telling you, man, the parallels between Bloodraven and Ned they just keep popping up the more I think about it.
Being Ashara Dane? Like, who gives a fuck about Ashara Dane? Like, you know, like in the story, nobody, you know, Barristan, you know, but that's it. So
He could sprinkle those in, like it being Shira Seastar, which you're right about that, or Ashara Dane. He could sprinkle that in for like super fans who read the other stuff.
Yeah.
Who read the other material, but at the same time,
super fan Easter eggs in the background. That means like that, but other than that, like fairly meaningless. You know, this is even the thing about. I'm even gonna go as far and talk about R plus L equals J. Like at this point in the story, who fucking cares? Like, John was worrying about his maternity in the first book, and Ned thought about his sister and was obsessed about his sister in the first book. But you know what? And Robert was obsessed about Lyanna in the first book. But you know what? Like, Robert and Ned died, and John stopped thinking about his mom. Like, he talked about her some in A Clash of Kings, but like, he had other shit to deal with, like others, and trying to run the Night's Watch.
Yeah, the Jon Snow's mother mystery. He's right that it's basically faded in the background since Game of Thrones and Clash of Kings. And it's kind of stayed there. And it does kind of feel like, well, who cares? Who cares at this point who Jon Snow's mother is? There are way bigger things at stake than the Stark family drama. We've got the others coming down. We've had kings dying, armies clashing, children being born, and people being married, dragons being born and growing. But at the same time, it hasn't gone away. The Jon Snow's mother mystery is still lingering there in the background. And it feels like it's kind of threatening to resurface at some point. It would be inconceivable for A Song of Ice and Fire to end without us getting some solid answers on the Jon Snow's mother mystery. And there are tons of mysteries like that in the story. Who was Azor Ahai? Who was Nissa Nissa? What's Lightbringer? Who was the Knight of the Laughing Tree? Why did Ashara Dane kill herself? What's the real deal with the whole House Dane thing and the stillborn daughter and all that? What really happened between Rhaegar and Lyanna? It's almost inconceivable that the story ends without us getting some irrefutable answers on all of these mysteries, and countless more of them. So they're all just kind of lingering in the background. And them lingering in the background, to me, feels like the story's building up to a big explosion of very fast revelations about all of these things. And it has to achieve it without feeling like a long explicative info dump. Like, we can't just have Rhaegar and Ashara and Arthur Dane and everybody show up alive and say, hey, here's what really happened, and here's what this means. If it's going to happen, I think it's going to happen through the same mechanism that so many of the story's other big mysteries have been revealed through. If it's going to be satisfying and short enough to fit, the mechanism is recontextualization. For example, before Lysa gets pushed out of the moon door, and we finally learn that she's the one who poisoned John Aaron, all of the John Aaron murder mystery stuff before that, stretching all the way back to the first chapter of A Game of Thrones, gets recontextualized. And we're able to reread it and see all the things that we missed. And go, oh. Oh, and Tyrion said to Littlefinger that he knows who John Aaron's murderer was. Littlefinger perked up and got super interested. And this is why. Because he was working with Lysa. However all of these mysteries resolve, I think it has to happen through recontextualization, where we learn some key bits of information that snap all of these disparate pieces of information together in a way that causes a very big revelation in the mind of the readers, exposing different and extra meanings in a massive amount of the text throughout the story that we've already read.
And like, Lyanna disappeared. So like all the characters that cared about R plus L are gone. So it to have the reveal even now at this point, it's like, well, who cares?
I wouldn't say it's pointless because it does let the audience in on this big secret. First off, I have to say, I think Comic Book Girl 19, she really popularized R plus L equals J, but because before her, like Stark, House History Stark video, it does kind of let the audience in on like this cool secret.
Comment Girl 319? Is that what he said?
It adds that little level of frustration and excitement knowing what we know, but the characters don't know.
Right, but for most of the story, because at this point now, because George has now like lengthened these books and has added all of these books, like we've got a whole bunch of Ironborn characters: Theon, Asha, Victarion, Aeron.
Euron.
Well, sure. Do any of them care about R plus L? No. Okay. The Dornish. You know, that maybe Doran Martell might care, but would Quentin, would Arianne, like would Ariahota, would it have any emotional weight that R plus L? Like they don't really care. Dany, she never even knew her brother. Like, okay. Cersei.
The attitude that the Targaryens are the rightful rulers of Westeros still lingers in Westeros. But it's in conflict with the attitude that the Baratheons are the rightful rulers of Westeros. Because the Baratheons did win legitimately through conquest. The legitimacy of conquest, of course, coming through its conquestness.
Yeah, vaguely, abstractly, she was in love with Rhaegar. But she doesn't really think about Lyanna or very much. Jaime doesn't. I mean, he actually knew Rhaegar, but
it would paint a target on Jon's back. It really would. It would make every character interact with him a bit differently than like Stannis right now. Like needs Jon's help.
Sure.
But it would make Stannis, like, if it was revealed to Stannis that Jon has Targaryen blood, he would interact with him differently. It would change a lot of things about Jon and how he could go moving forward if it was revealed. So
Yeah, it would be a big problem for Jon. Especially in his relationships with other claimants to the throne. They would want to take him out, or get behind him. Say, I'll be your champion. Help you get the throne. And then Jon will say, I don't want it.
Understand the importance of that. The Dornish could try to use him
for like most of the books, like Sansa's story, Arya's story, Bran's story. It's kind of irrelevant. Or at least not emotionally like salient. Even something
that's
like
the right phrase. Like it's relevant, It's just not emotionally salient for a lot of characters. But claims to the throne have a way of becoming emotionally salient to characters.
Now, besides John Con and like John, who like, hasn't thought about it recently, but did think about like who his mom would be. Like those are the only characters that would possibly care. It's just not like an emotional issue for anybody else. So it's just like such an irrelevant thing. I'm just saying that like the character of Tywin Lannister is more emotionally salient for the story than Rhaegar and Lyanna at this point. Because like Tywin greatly affects Tyrion. He greatly affects Cersei. He greatly affects Jaime. He greatly affects the Dornish story.
It's kind of curious to hear a sort of disregard for the relevance of politics from Preston, because he's usually pretty interested in the politics of the story. The story is designed to kind of bait the reader to disregard politics, and Preston's pretty good about not taking the bait most of the time.
Right. Like, even in a sense, you could say because of the rebellion, it greatly affects the Ironborn. Stannis has a bigger emotional impact on all of these, than a lot of these characters. Because he has such an interaction with the Ironborn and the North now at this point. But you're just going through these chapters, and it's just like, should Davos give a fuck? No. Does Melisandre give a fuck? No.
Well, like
Nobody
I said,
gives a fuck.
the only people
Hey, Rhaegar is king's blood. Melisandre might care.
who I think could give a fuck if it goes down that route would be the Dornish wanting to use him, maybe the Lannisters wanting to knock him out, maybe Stannis wanting to knock him out because that is a competitor.
It might add some political complexity, but it doesn't add any emotional complexity.
Yeah. Not right away, it wouldn't. So apparently there's more of that. I would like to hear the rest of that, but maybe another time. Let's find another one. Ranking A Song of Ice and Fire books. From worst to best. Kayla Christensen.
Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be ranking A Song of Ice and Fire books from worst to best, or from my least favorite to my favorite. The quick disclaimer is that, of course, this is completely subjective, and
My favorite's A Game of Thrones.
everybody's going to have a different opinion, which is a good thing. And I would actually love to hear your own personal rankings down below. This ranking will also obviously shift a little bit when the new book is finally released. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm just going to go ahead and get started. My least favorite is definitely A Feast for Crows. I don't know if this is a
This is everybody's least favorite.
opinion.
This is the most popular least favorite, or the most least favorite. I don't know how to say it. You know what I mean. And it's kind of a meme in the community, the Ice and Fire community, that if you want to be cool, you say that A Feast for Crows is your favorite to sound cultured and high class and whatever. Mostly because A Feast for Crows is, the big critique of it is that gets thrown around is the word travelogue. To some people it feels like a travelogue, where you're just traveling through Westeros, seeing the countryside and all that. Lots of landscape descriptions and interactions with small folk, which is a new feature of A Song of Ice and Fire introduced with A Feast for Crows. It's definitely where the story's attention to the small folk ramps up. For readers who have not caught on yet to the sneaky patterns that the story is pulling with the small folk and its relationship to the story's theme about power, it can easily feel like an unnecessary tangent.
this is the only book in the series that I just found it incredibly difficult to get through. I think generally the parts that I thought were really hard to get through were the entire Iron Island storyline. To me, felt just boring, I guess. I just wasn't interested in it. I didn't like any of the characters really. I just found this, and that storyline really dominated this book a lot of the time. It was a huge part of the book, and so I just found that really difficult to get through.
All right, I feel like watching something different.
So during your live stream,
Oh.
someone asked
I found part 2.
you a question about your thoughts on a theory, because you're the theory guy. Your thoughts on the theory that Aegon won, Aegon the Conqueror. They asked you the theory on how,
Aegon won.
if it's possible that a faceless man was able to sneak into the Red Keep, or not into the Red Keep, into his camp, kidnap him, wear his face, and throughout the rest of his life, it wasn't him, it was just a faceless man. And this was a theory someone asked you.
Yeah.
You remember what I'm talking about?
I do.
And I have to ask you, like, and no offense to the person who said it, because that person is a very nice person, they're always in your stream chat. I have to ask you, as someone who, like, spends hours and hours crafting your theories and all that, does it kind of annoy you when people come with you with, like, this low-effort stuff? Because, and I know that sounds very harsh of me to say, but my brother in Christ, the guy just essentially gave you the plot to Marvel's Secret Invasion, where a supernatural being, not supernatural, but where a supernatural power of shape-shifting takes over a political person and runs a country. That's essentially the plot of Marvel's Secret Invasion.
Sure. I mean, it's I don't know if it annoys me. But
Yeah, those don't annoy me. I just ignore them. I don't spend my time on them anymore. Like, there's way better stuff to read, pay attention to. And every once in a blue moon, I'll dabble in some crackpot theory. Like, all right, let's give this one a chance. This looks good quality for a crackpot theory. And almost invariably, it'll disappoint me. I'll be like, oh yeah, this is why I don't do this anymore. I don't read these anymore. But I appreciate it for what it is. Just a fun romp of ideas, of things that'll probably never happen. Who knows, sometimes you even take away some interesting food for thought. Like, oh, this is an interesting mishmash of mechanics that are in the story that I hadn't considered. Like somebody warging a dragon or skin changing a dragon, I guess would be the term.
it's difficult to engage with if there's not like textual evidence of something. And talk about whether or not like something is textually possible. You know, also like there's things that are provable, and there's things that are, and then there are things that are falsifiable. But then some things are just like, well, they're kind of neither, and you're like, well, that like, I suppose that could happen, but it's really difficult to say. Like, you know, I could say, hey, you know, what if there were life in the star system, like around the star Sirius B? I'd be like, okay, we have no evidence there is. We have no evidence there's not.
Yeah, this is the trouble with the story's POV limited first-person style. Or in other words, the trouble with unreliable narration. Because unreliable narration is what that style enables. Activates. The trouble is that it's easy to fall into the habit of using the absence of evidence as evidence of absence. Like, when you're supposing that something is unreliable narration, how do you know that that's not what you're doing? You'll probably already know that that's an illogical thing to do, but even knowing that, it isn't always easy to tell when you're doing it. But the example I always use is Jaime and Brienne's bath scene at Harrenhal, where they're both in the bath together. And it's a big bath, so it's not as gross as it sounds when I say it like that. But what if I were to suppose that in the bathtub with Jaime and Brienne, there was floating a rubber ducky? Now, I could assert that the rubber ducky's there, and there's nothing in the story that you could show me in that scene to prove that the rubber ducky is not there. But at the same time, there's nothing I could show you to prove that it is there. I could just claim that it's there. There's nothing you can do about it. Obvious to everyone, there is no rubber ducky in the bath, because Westeros doesn't have rubber duckies. And even if they did, they probably wouldn't use them as bath toys like we do in the real world. Because we've never seen a bath toy in the story. And because bath time is not really conflated with playtime. Just 100 fucking reasons, right? But anyway, the solution I use, or provisional solution, let's say, is that I use a 3-step process to test for unreliable narration. This first step is, first you need some narration. The second step is you need some narration that contradicts the first narration. And the third step is that you need some explanation for why one narration is more credible than the other. And so when you apply it to the rubber ducky example, it fails to qualify as unreliable narration because there is no text in that scene or anywhere in the story that contradicts the absence of the rubber ducky. But yeah, if you talk about this story long enough with people, you'll eventually notice that a lot of them do that. And they don't know that they're doing it. And they don't know that it's the wrong thing to do.
And if there were, it doesn't really affect our life here on this planet. So like and so it's just, it has to be like, it's not that there's effort or not. I mean, there are a lot of high effort theories that are wrong, like Howland Reed is the High Sparrow, and then there's some low effort theories that are probably right, but
that too, yeah.
But
there's both.
Yeah, it's just like I just think about like how, like, what can I do with it? Can I like try to prove it right or prove it wrong? What would that mean for the story? Like those kind of questions. Like where does it go next? And and to be honest, with that particular thing, we did start discussing dragon bonds and what a faceless man who takes on the persona of somebody else be able to ride a dragon. And we've started discussing like what Arya was feeling when she took on the ugly little girl's face and stuff like that, and the memories and stuff like that. So it did lead to some interesting discussions. But that's the thing. I'm mainly focused on whether or not, like, one, if you can like prove it or disprove it, and like legalistically like finding the things that support it and don't support it, and if it kind of like has an impact on the story. But that's kind of what I think about. So no, I wasn't.
That's another really important test. The impact on the story.
Wasn't really annoyed or anything like that.
Let me
particular one
explain.
went to discussion.
Let me explain my feelings on the whole thing, because I don't want people to think I'm an asshole for saying that. But you also need to understand that, like, first and foremost, you taking that, in my opinion, dumb theory question into like a whole phenomenal discussion. Not to suck your dick, but that really speaks to like how great of a content creator you are. So props for that. The reason, like,
yeah, Preston makes mostly good content. I'm not so hot on his like TV show stuff, where he's like bashing the TV show. A lot of his critiques of this TV show seem weak to me. Like he's just ignoring a lot of obvious things to make the critique work.
I get annoyed is because I know you spend hours upon hours, not only crafting your theories, but also doing the fanfics. You put a lot of effort into what you do, of course. And a lot of these theories seem very, very low effort. This stuff happens all the time. As someone who runs an Ice and Fire channel, I get these messages all the time, and they just seem low effort compared to someone like you or, other YouTubers who spend hours, like, just thinking about the material. The other thing is that I also don't like theories where one person is secretly another person. where person A is secretly person B. I've always found those very lame, but also very numerous in the fandom. What I like personally is...
They are very numerous, yeah.
Yeah, oh my god.
I mean, there's a few...
Well, they're numerous, but I feel like most of them are self-aware. Well, I don't know about most, but a lot of them are self-aware that what they're doing is silly, lazy crap. And they're just having fun with it. So those don't bother me so much. The ones that take it seriously don't bother me that much either. Just because I can choose not to read them, like find something that interests me. But yeah, I'll leave it there. I don't want to name any names or anything.
There's a few in the story, obviously, like Arston Whitebeard is Barristan and Sorella Sand is Aleros and stuff like that. But they do happen, so it's hard. Rattleshirt is Mance. It's not that they don't happen, So I can understand why people put them in.
But Kyberg being secretly Oswald Went, like, stuff like that, or, Darkstar being actually Arthur Dane, like, okay. Like, stuff like that. I mean, the theories that I like is that person A is secretly working for person B, or person A has a hidden lineage and is in cahoots with this group. So stuff like that I enjoy, but I don't know. To me, it always seems like whenever anyone messages me about their personal theories, it always seems very low effort. Like they didn't put that many thought into it. They just wanted to like have a conversation with you, which I'll have a conversation.
Yeah, but you've got to expect that. Like as a YouTuber, you're automatically in the top like 0.01% of people who are invested in this story and analyzing it and thinking about it, referencing it, following the fandom and all that. So the chances that you're going to get messages that demonstrate a level of investment even remotely comparable to yours is extremely low.
With you, and you usually have a conversation with anybody. I feel like a lot of the theories I see is just people trying to be either the next Preston Jacobs or trying to recreate the magic they felt when they first heard the Dornish master plan or the Pink Letter. It's just I feel like everyone's trying to recreate classic Coke, and they just come up short.
That always happens with successful creations, though. You get a bunch of imitators. It's just a feature of the landscape of success.
Yeah, I mean it's I guess it's hard at this point. A lot of the theories have been exhausted, I suppose. We've been through things with a fine-tooth comb. Quite a bit. I mean, there's probably still some more theories out there to do and have, but I don't see the same sort of like effort. And since the show ended and things like that, and since people kind of like lost hope with the winter coming out and things like that,
I detect a fear of the winds of winter at this point. I think a lot of the fandom has staked their flag so deeply into the camps, the ideological camps that characterize the divisions in the audience, that the publication of The Winds of Winter looks to them less like the long-awaited arrival and more like a threat to their beliefs about the story and about the real world, insofar as their beliefs about the story are rooted in their beliefs about the real world.
Enthusiasm for theories is not as high as it used to be.
Does that bother you, or are you just very like, eh?
No. I mean, we all move on to do different things. It's fine. And if the Winds ever comes out, maybe we can have some more theories again. But
maybe enthusiasm's less than it used to be for Ice and Fire. I mean, certainly the part of it that came from the TV show, because the TV show ended. But I'm trying to be fair and compare it to the part of it that preceded the TV show. I'm not so sure that enthusiasm is reduced in that comparison. It seems to me more like there's an assault on the idea of canon, where everybody's sort of fragmenting into their headcanons, trying to have their own personal truth of what the story is and what it means and what's going to happen in it in the future. The publication of another book would shatter a lot of those alternative personal realities.
See which ones are right and wrong. But
Well, you've also moved on from theories too.
because it's tough for me. It's tough for me to get motivated to make a theory on something that I'll never find the answer to. Like, yeah, I could go with.
Here's what motivates me. Reading or watching other people do a very bad job of analyzing the story or predicting it.
And start making theories on, like, I always wanted to do theories on the Boltons and like what was going on with them, but like the book's never going to come out, so it just doesn't seem exciting anymore to do that. So we've moved on to other things. That's
That's actually fair, and honestly, like, watching the Dornish Master Plan and Pink Letter videos, and what you do now, you do a lot of more analytical stuff, which is also fucking awesome, like the Brienne stuff, and the I would say the election of Jon Snow is less theory and more like analytical.
Yeah.
So, and I'm assuming, and obviously overanalyzing House of the Dragon and stuff like that. So you've kind of done a really cool natural progression from deep insight theories into just deep, insightful, analytical videos on the characters and topics and whatnot. So I feel like that's a natural progression. But I feel like everyone's still trying to like recapture something as original and cool as Pink Letter or Dornish Master Plan.
If there is a shift happening away from theories into analysis, that excites me so much. I would love to see more analysis and less theory crafting. That was cool. I really like these videos. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Had fun hanging out. I'm going to call it there. I gotta get some rest. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.